are talking Isolation from 2005, which is essentially The Thing on a Farm. This one is from writer-director Billy O'Brien and stars Ruth Negga, John Lynch and Essie Davis. Now, I was actually recommended to watch this movie from a live stream. It's a movie that I'd not actually heard of before, and I've forgotten who asked me to kind of review it, so I do apologise, but I'm glad they did, because this certainly was a somewhat of an interesting movie. Let me kind of go over you some brief plot points. So we have this out-of-the-way farm who is owned by this farmer played by John Lynch, and he has been paid for this company to do some type of genetic experiments on his cows. At the same time, he's got a traveller couple that has turned up on his land who he's initially at odds with. But during one night where this cow is giving birth to this calf, there is something's wrong. So the farmer asked these traveller couples to try and help him, which they do. And they realise there is something significantly wrong with the cow and the calf. And this calf appears to actually be pregnant itself. But the horror doesn't end there. As things escalate, there is some bovine beasties on the loose. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So let's talk about what works first of all in Isolation. So this is a pretty tight thriller horror movie that I think does evoke feelings of The Thing, that kind of sense of isolation, that kind of sense of paranoia. Where is this thing? I mean, it's not impersonating humans. That's kind of the difference here, but it is certainly an entity that is desperate to kind of reproduce and is more parasitic in nature, but it will definitely give you that Thing vibes, or maybe look somewhat of a Thing cross like a xenomorph sort of style creature here. But I've got to say, the movie does a great job in ratcheting up tension as the movie goes on, with some kind of real great kind of location shooting on a particular farm here that just gives you this kind of rustic feel, which is, as I say, very kind of isolated, but also you just feel like it's all a little old-fashioned, and there just isn't anything really to hand here that's going to be able to cope with any type of disaster. All the equipment seems to be run down and kind of battered. They're vastly kind of dealing with the kind of elements that they're unknown here. The shady kind of corporate guy, it obviously knows more than he's kind of letting on. So there's a great kind of like setup within this movie, and I think it just really does play along. There's something in the shadows. There's something you just don't know where it is. This kind of creature could be literally anywhere, and it presents dangers because it's desperate to reproduce. And there's obviously ways that it kind of does that, and it almost infects people. I thought the acting was solid. I think everyone here does a great job, and I actually kind of liked the relationship between our farmer and these kind of two travellers who are initially at odds, but coming to kind of together and seem like they have kind of quite a good bond, and I actually kind of quite like their kind of the chemistry between all the actors here. And I kind of thought it did a good job. I would say maybe the corporate, the genetic guy was a little bit mustache twirling in his kind of villainous role there, but I guess it is what it is with in regards to that. But generally speaking, I thought the acting here was solid. There's some quite disturbing practical effects on display here, and let me just put it: if you're a vegetarian, you might want to not watch this movie, as there are a lot of cows being, in the context of the film, kind of being put down, and guts and things like that. It's maybe not a movie for vegetarians. The creature design is interesting. I'm going to come on to that again because I don't think it completely works, but the actual creature is evolving as the sort of film goes on, and it kind of looks more like a cuttlefish than a cow, to be quite honest with you. It certainly makes for an interesting design, and it will kind of remind you of the elements with the thing. It's kind of just like a mess of like body parts. So it definitely, again, it has Thing vibes within those kind of areas as well. And yeah, it's you know, I've got to say it's fairly exciting. It has an element of fear and kind of like dread in it, and you kind of you're kind of wanting to see what happens, which leads me on to that maybe what doesn't work. I think what happens is fairly obvious, and you can kind of guess where it's going. Especially maybe like, you know, the very kind of final scene. I thought I knew that was going to happen. It was just so like it didn't really do anything to really subvert any expectations in regards to the standard kind of plot points that these kind of films have. You know, I think this is a case where it's very well presented, but the meat of the bones is not bad. It's just a flavour that you've had many times. So I think the actual story itself won't really be all too surprising for many people. As I've said, maybe the kind of this head of this genetics place was a little bit kind of the generic kind of bad guy as well. You know, corporate kind of goon style, you know, bad guy. It was a little bit obvious in his portrayal of this particular character. And the only other thing I would say is the creature itself, I'm not entirely sure works. The very end of the movie, we see its final form. And to be honest with you, it just kind of looks like a bunch of like bones and guts being sort of dragged along by a wire in some shots. The whole point of this creature is it's messed up. You know, it's a ghastly mutation of a cow. It never really seems like a cow. I have to say. It definitely acts more like a predator. And I just don't know if the physics... I mean, some of the effects work, the practical work is very good. Certainly when we see kind of smaller versions of it, and it's pretty gross. It has some gross imagery, but there are scenes here where I just think it looks a little bit like a kind of a mishmash of like polystyrene, whatever they've used to kind of make this foam kind of creature that is just like wobbling around in places. I think it kind of took away a little bit of the kind of the deathly kind of quality that this movie possessed for the rest of the time. But it was overall a very enjoyable movie, I've got to say. You know, maybe the critiques are relatively minor in some respects. I mean, but overall, I think the quality far outshines some of the negatives that I've had. But I will give this one a 7 out of 10. And this was a good movie, and I appreciate the recommendation for whoever said that. So it's a 7 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.